And it's time for under 30. As you mentioned, we're talking Yandex. Oftentimes compared to Google to address the Russian marketplace within the tech space. This is a really interesting chart. If we could pull up the chart here real quick, guys, just like a one-year chart of YNDX to look at it, because, Jenny, a big key piece of this show today and what we've covered today has been this idea of names that have been just absolutely decimated over time, and this idea of catching the falling knife. This was not a small company. It's lost about 80% of its value. It's about 1/5 of it once was, and it's still a $7 billion company. So you're talking about a company that was upwards of $40 billion, addressing a smaller marketplace in the sense that they're addressing Russia, obviously big population, but it's certainly not the GDP or of that of US or China, so keep that in mind. But lost so much value, and it's only accelerated as these events have taken place. But this has been a prolonged sell-off that really goes back to the latter parts of the fourth quarter of last year. And so when you look at this stock has lost about $30 in the last 2 or 3 sessions, but it had already lost about $30 before that. So this is just one more example of just because it's cheap relatively does not mean it cannot get cheaper, particularly when there's things that are outside of the control of even the company like Yandex.
I completely agree, Alex. And you mentioned some of the weakness they have seen even prior to this week. I believe they've fallen about 50% this week alone, but they had antitrust probes. They had concerns over their profitability. And something I want to mention is they trade at just 2.2 times this year's sales, which is a really low valuation considering this company is not only a search engine, but also a ride-hailing and e-commerce giant. So to tell us more on this name and the fundamentals, which are so important when seeing a move lower like we have, is George Tsilis, TD Ameritrade Network contributor. George, a lot of things weighing on this name right now, obviously, but looking at this company, I mean, we're seeing such heightened volatility today, which is actually why it was on my radar.
You know, Jenny, interesting. I know you brought up the price to sales ratio. From a valuation standpoint, it looks compelling, but look, I think you have to consider sanctions, but even things like censorship. I think that's also been a concern for Yandex. I mean, the stock is down. Looks like it was around $89 in November. It's down dramatically. It is not necessarily a Russian company. It's actually a Dutch company, but 92% of its sales are in Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan area of the world. I mean, it's an interesting company. It's not just search engines. It's not just the Google of Russia, but they also have other segments, which include, of course, marketplaces, classified media services, and now essentially they're like the Uber of Russia. So they're really a large, technology-based conglomerate, as well as actually a cloud-based business, which has been growing. Overall, sales of the company have been growing, but, I mean, this is what we get when it comes down to military conflicts, political and geopolitical events, and the stock is extremely volatile, trading down about 8.5% right now to about 1860.
George, is the way to sum this up to say that it's not for the faint of heart at this point? Reasons to the side of what's actually influencing the stock price movement, but just the sheer uncertainty of this marketplace right now. Buyer beware, right?
Exactly. I mean, I had to go all the way back to a 10-year chart to find some areas of price stability, and we're talking about prices now that we actually haven't seen since 2016. Again, I think, for those who are interested in potentially playing this thing out in terms of, hey, is this going to be over sooner than later? Are sanctions going to be pulled back? Is everything going to be back to normal in terms of peace and prosperity? There's a possibility of that. These are opportunities, sure, but this thing could even collapse further from here, and that's one of the challenges. But at the end of the day, it's dropped so significantly in the past couple of months. It started falling prior to this. I mean, it really is demonstrative of what was going on in the technology space since around November 10th. That's when everything started rolling over. Yandex wasn't, of course, immune to that, but since, of course, the conflict began, it's down considerably since then. But look, when it comes down to its business, I mean, they're basically, if you want to put it into context, almost like a Facebook, Google, and Uber all put together in one company. They do have large market share in Russia, but you have to also consider the fact that right now, despite the fact that they're expecting to earn 86 cents in the next 4 quarters, it's trading at a very low forward PE. there's still a tremendous amount of risk. So it's not for the faint of heart. For those who are risk takers, anything is possible. But again, we could certainly see this thing drop down to the single digits, or it could double from here.
I mean, George, even the move we saw today, it was higher previously. Now we're seeing the shares down over 8%. I mean, the volatility in this name is absolutely outstanding.